It's the Real News Network, and I'm Greg Wilpert in Baltimore. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution on Thursday that invokes the War Powers Act to prevent President Donald Trump from engaging in military hostilities against Iran unless Congress declares war against Iran. The vote was 224 to 194, mostly along party lines, with 3 Republicans joining Democrats in favor of the resolution. The resolution now goes to the Senate, where its fate remains uncertain, both in terms of when the vote might take place and whether enough Republicans will support this resolution or a different one. 2 Libertarian Republican senators, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and Senator Mike Lee of Utah, have said that they would support such a resolution, so only 2 more Republicans would be needed for it to pass in the Senate. On Thursday, both Senators Paul and Lee expressed frustration with the Trump administration's justification for killing Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, on January 3rd, which initiated this most recent crisis with Iran. During a closed-door hearing, the administration argued that the 2002 authorization to use military force in Iraq was not sufficient to authorize an attack on General Soleimani. Senator Rand Paul even called the use of this authorization an insult and absurd. Joining me now to discuss the War Powers Resolution is Hassan El-Tayyab. He is the lead lobbyist for the Friends Committee on National Legislation on Middle East Policy. Thanks for joining us again, Hassan.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Greg.
So let's start with some of the criticism that this particular War Powers Resolution has received from progressives and anti-war activists. The resolution is what is known as a concurrent resolution, which means that it is technically non-binding, at least in other cases. The advantage is that even if it passes both the House and the Senate, it cannot be vetoed. However, it also means that it does not necessarily have the force of law, according to some analysts. Now, yesterday we spoke to Representative Barbara Lee of California about this type of resolution. Here's what she had to say about the choice of this resolution.
Well, it may not be the strongest, but I'm voting for it because we have to make sure we get the votes to pass it. It would be, we should have a bipartisan vote on this with Republicans also. I'm not sure if we will or not, but you have to have everybody voting for something. And so I would want to see it stronger, but I don't think we can say no to something to make progress.
What is your sense of the significance of this resolution, given that it is, according to some people, non-binding?
Well, I think it's important to remember that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution is absolutely clear that only Congress has the power to declare war. And so by, the Congress voting for the Iran War Powers Resolution, they basically reaffirmed what's already law, that the president cannot launch an offensive war against Iran without an authorization for use of force. So that's absolutely clear. Now, the concurrent resolution, some Democrats actually are arguing, and some legal experts are arguing that under the War Powers Act, it's a special case in that they actually are legally binding. So that's still kind of an open question. But that aside, it's so important that Congress make this vote, assert its war authority, and force the question and force the debate on something that is so absolutely important. I think Matt Gaetz said it really well yesterday, a Republican from Florida, that, if one of his constituents actually was killed in Afghanistan in the line of duty and was buried, and he said that if he has the courage to fight and die for America, then Congress should at least have the courage to vote on whether or not we should be using use of military force.
Now, of course, Republicans have criticized this resolution, with Senator Lindsey Graham arguing that it actually emboldens Iran. Here's what Graham had to say about this.
I think they're overreacting, quite frankly. Go debate all you want to. I'm going to debate you. Trust me, I'm going to let people know that at this moment in time, to play this game with a War Powers Act, which I think is unconstitutional, is that whether you mean to or not, you're empowering the enemy. I know you don't mean to, but we live in the real world here. So debate all you want. This is a constitutional democracy, but get ready for a lively debate.
What's your response to this?
Well, I think we have to turn the clock back a little bit and really talk about how we got in this situation in the first place. And I think, you have to look, we were on a path for diplomacy with the Iran nuclear deal. You know, and when President Trump pulled us out of the Iran nuclear deal, it set off a whole series of escalations. So I would say that what we really need to be getting back to is a diplomatic path forward, you know, ratcheting down the rhetoric, de-escalating the situation, and we do that through diplomacy, not war.
So, as we were just starting this interview, it was announced that new sanctions, that the Trump administration would impose new sanctions against Iran. What would you say should be the next step in responding to the Trump administration's policies towards Iran? I mean, specifically also the possibility of, you know, what the Senate needs to do, and then moving forward, what else can be done?
So, yeah, I mean, the sanctions regime on Iran, the maximum pressure campaign, has been devastating for years and really just caused extreme poverty and loss of life to innocent Iranians who, you know, don't have a say in the matter. The sanctions regime has basically cut off critical life-saving medicines that you know, ordinary Iranians need, and this is not weakening the regime. This is not you know, making it so they cannot operate. It's really just hurting average people. The new sanction regime are going to double down. Again, it's going to escalate the situation and put more pressure on ordinary Iranians. And I don't think that's the right call. So going forward, what we need to do on that front is to create humanitarian exemptions, at the very least, create humanitarian exemptions for sanctions. So at least the life-saving medicines that Iranian people, the Iranians need, at least can get through. As far as what's going to happen in the Senate next, it's a little unclear. Because of the parliamentarian has, I think, said that the concurrent resolution, HCON Res 83, the one that Slotkin introduced in the House of Representatives, the Iran War Powers Resolution, would not be able to be discharged from committee. So unfortunately, that might not be the vehicle we take up. Luckily, though, Senator Kaine from Virginia has introduced another joint resolution, and that is SJ Res 63, and that is probably going, because it's under the procedural expedited status of the War Powers Act, that's going to get a vote sometime next week or the week after. So, and that, you know, that is unequivocal. That does have the force of law, and if that passes, that will be enacted into law. So, that's, you know, what we're watching for in the Senate. As far as other vehicles, what we want to do is keep getting Congress to vote again and again. There's the Connor-Sanders resolution that would be a prohibition of spending. Congress asserting itself by using the power of the purse and preemptively cutting off any funds for an offensive war against Iran. And there's also Barbara Lee's 2002 AUMF repeal. And like you said, the administration is saying that the outdated 2002 Iraq AUMF, which was used to go after Saddam Hussein, was authorizing their use of military force to assassinate Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian government official. So that, to me, is absolutely absurd. That needs to be repealed, and Congress needs to make a series of votes on these critical issues. I've also heard people talk about potentially putting forth a resolution to censure the president for threatening to attack 52 Iranian cultural sites. And that, you know, if we were to carry that out, that would be a crime under international law, and that's just not what America's about.
I just want to return to the issue of the Senate's possibly passing a joint resolution. Now, if it does pass, you said it would have the force of law. However, of course, it is pretty well known and expected that President Trump will veto such a resolution. Now, and it's unlikely that a two-thirds majority in both the House and the Senate will be able to override that veto. Or what do you say? I mean, what does that mean basically in the long term for this resolution? Is there a way to stop the president from escalating the situation against Iran?
Well, one, I think it's absolutely critical that Congress continue forcing the question, forcing the debate, generating news headlines, And by doing that, we also are winning in the court of public opinion. Basically, the framers designed it so the Congress, the body most accountable to the people the most often, would have the power over war and peace through being able to authorize use of military force and to declare war. So by forcing these votes, I think we're going to start. We're winning. We already are winning the court of public opinion and making it so it's politically impossible for Trump to push forward for an unauthorized war against Iran. So I think, for starters, we have that. But I should also mention that, getting bipartisan support is critical in showing that, yes, not just Democrats, but Republicans as well want to prevent an unauthorized war in Iran. And lastly, I will say that that there are some legal experts that think we should even push further, and that Congress, should he veto this resolution, should actually file a Supreme Court lawsuit and basically try to reclaim their constitutional war authority in the courts.
I think that's a really interesting point. But we're going to have to leave it there for now. I'm speaking to Hassan El-Tayyab, lead lobbyist with the Friends Committee on National Legislation on Middle East Policy. Thanks again, Hassan, for having joined us today.
Hey, thank you so much, Gregory.
And thank you for joining the Real News Network.
Thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate it. But do us one more solemn favor. Hit the subscribe button below. You know you want to. Stay up on the videos.